Alright guys, so this is SSD Sustainable Self-Development, a podcast for people who want to get ahead in fitness and in life without driving themselves crazy. So if you want to look up a year from now and think, damn, I came a long way, but you don't want to burn out in the process as you get there, you came to the right place. We'll get into today's episode in just a second, but just want to let you know that we have an awesome community on Facebook in the form of a group which you can join, where we discuss and debate things, drop ideas, debate over which person to interview for the next podcast, and all that good stuff. So go to Facebook, type in Sustainable Self-Development, or you can just check the show notes here and click the link there, and you'll find the Sustainable Self-Development Facebook group and you can join. Also, not sure where you're listening to this right now, but this podcast is available on a variety of platforms: iTunes, SoundCloud, Podbeam, and YouTube. You can find it on all of these platforms if you just type in Sustainable Self-Development, because luckily nobody is weird enough to name themselves in such a way except me. So look me up on these places and follow the show by subscribing so that you don't miss future episodes. And with that, let's get into the show. Okay, so hey everybody, welcome. No, that's not how I start. Welcome everybody, and thank you for tuning in. And I'm very excited to welcome back Mr. Jacob Schepis. Now I know how to actually pronounce his name. And he has been on my podcast before. There we talked about more kind of broad topics related to fitness, nutrition, and training. And we are going to talk a little bit about those things again. But we are kind of going to talk about some more mental aspects that are related to fitness, but we will see how that goes. But first of all, I want to welcome Jacob, and I guess let's start with my first question, which is how long till the end of your contest prep, which you're currently doing for a bodybuilding show?
Thanks for having me, Abel. Pleasure to be back on the show. So, yeah, we're currently in the midst of the contest prep at the moment. To be honest, I can't remember off the top of my head how many weeks in I am at the moment. All I know is I started in the second week of January in the lead up to getting on stage in Season B in Australia, which is around September, October this year. So approximately 6 months out at the moment, and been going, for about, give or take, 10 weeks now.
Damn, that's insane. Because like I'm looking at your pictures, and I was just scrolling through your Instagram. It's pretty creepy to say, but anyway. And I was looking at your physique, and I was thinking, like, if I were you, I would step on stage right now, because like you look like Arnold or something. Like you, I mean, obviously by modern bodybuilding standards, it's not completely striated glutes level leanness, but you're pretty much as lean as kind of the classic bodybuilder era, where how those guys looked at that time. So I don't know. I mean, I don't even know how long ago it was that I actually asked this question of someone, but what would you estimate your body fat percentage to be at the moment?
I would say around the 10% mark at present. 10%. I don't think I'm sub 10% just yet. To be honest, it's not something I think about too much. It's funny because I know this is going to tie into a lot of our conversation and discussion today, but like you were saying, the standard of lean and body fat percentages required in the current natural bodybuilding era are stupendously low. And if I were to compare where I'm at now to where I need to be or where I want to be, I do feel quite out of shape. And I guess that's quite alarming. It's not something that I'm necessarily concerned with or that eats away at my self-esteem, so to speak. But yeah, I don't feel like I'm where I need to be, but I know that a lot of other people look at my physique now and go, wow, this guy's 6 months out. He could get on stage in a month or two if he really wanted and do quite well. But as you mentioned, the standard now is ridiculous. So, being 10% simply doesn't cut it, but it does look good. It doesn't feel great for me, just because having been a bit of a chubby kid pretty much all my life, my body fat settling point is probably up around the 13-14% mark. If we were to use my current estimated body fat percentage as a gauge of where I'm sitting, I'm a little bit below my settling range. So it does feel a little bit uncomfortable, but yeah, that's where I'm at the moment. A lot of work to do, but fortunately we've got a lot of time and I'm in good hands working with the master himself, Alberto Nunez from 3DMJ.
Right. And okay, so right around the 10% mark. And what do you weigh, around like sub 80 kilos, something like that?
Yeah, so fluctuating at the moment, but I've hit a new low last week of 79.2, and I'm 5 foot 8.5, 5'9" on a good day. So yeah, so pretty short and stocky, if that's anything to go by. But yeah, around the 79 kilo mark. Last time I was on stage, I got down to 72 kilos. And I suspect that if I want to bring that, Brad Minor, Alberto Nunez, kind of conditioning, I'm going to need to get down to 72 kilos again. And obviously have hopefully put on a good 2 to 3 kilos in my 4 year off season, which means I'll be bringing some better conditioning than the last time I stepped on stage.
Yeah, and and just for the listeners, I mean, they can go ahead and check out your pictures. You're obviously one of those guys. Like your physique kind of reminds me of Jeff Alberts' physique. You obviously picked your parents pretty intelligently in that front. But yeah, it's just, I can't even imagine. It's the same thing with him. Like, I'm looking at his progress now, and I'm just thinking, how will this look like at the end? I'm actually curious. Like, it's just exciting to watch what the end product will be. But anyway, to slowly transition into what we are going to talk about is, now you've been in this game for a long time, and you've competed before, and you've learned a tremendous amount about your body, and also how to handle things from a mental perspective. And now, obviously, you're in very good hands, but also yourself have coached through people, processes like you're going through right now. And I have no doubts that your approach is a lot more balanced and reasonable than it used to be back in the day. But do you catch yourself every once in a while, as you're going through this, thinking like, hold on, Jacob, you're about to do something stupid like you would have done back in the day. Like, you're tempted to do one of those things again, but remember, just stay reasonable, stay balanced. You know better now. Do you catch yourself during these moments at all these days?
Yes, I think it's human nature as we venture into the unknown to revert back to our past experiences, or at least what we know works. And for me, this contest prep is very much in stark contrast to my prior contest prep back when I was 20 and 21, so 2013 and 2012, where it was very much a rigid all or nothing, list of 5 foods, fasted cardio, supplements, fat burners, high volume, etching in the lines kind of workouts, just go ham kind of mentality. Whereas this time around, there's a lot more thought, care, and, as you mentioned, balance towards the approach. So there is a lot of uncertainty for me, because in trying to achieve what I know is quite difficult for anyone, there are times where I have found myself, steering back to doing some of the practices that I would previously engage in, not in their true sense, as in I'm not eliminating all foods or doing stupid workouts and things like that, but I know that, some of those tendencies arise in a bodybuilding contest prep for good reason, and that is because they help us survive, right? Semi-starvation is not an easy process for anybody, and often we do engage in dangerous practices, more so because they make the process easier, because we don't have as much temptation, which is why a more rigid or a less flexible diet can be beneficial in a contest prep, because it just those hyperpalatable foods can spark some insatiable hunger and lead to overeating and all those kind of things. Fasted cardio can just be a great habit, even though not necessarily any beneficial for the liberation of body fat. It can be a good habit to engage in because it creates structure and consistency, which take out a lot of the willpower and motivation that you don't have in a contest prep. So there have been little glimpses of things that have been, I guess, a reliance for me in the past, such as the cardio. Yeah. I found myself, steering towards getting up in the morning and doing my cardio fasted, not necessarily for the same reason, but I guess in the back of my head it's there. And some of the scars that were left from my first 2 contest preps, they're still very much real. So there are some, uneasy emotions when I do find myself adopting the behaviors I used to employ back when I was a young, naive bodybuilder. But at the same time, I know full well that I'm a different person now. I'm a lot more mature, and with that comes a lot more poise and being level-headed about the decision-making process, with on a daily basis within the contest prep.
Yeah, it's the reason I was asking this is because right now I'm going through a cut, which is, I mean, that's nothing compared to what you're doing. I'm looking to get down to the level where you're at now, and you're like 6 months out. But still, I just caught myself the other day having these just like unreasonable minor little concerns about, okay, how much should I eat in this meal, or how I'm going to manage that event or something, which in the grand scheme of things, these things are just so meaningless, and there are so, like, the bigger picture matters so much more than these little acute choices. But it's just an instinctive thing that you gravitate back towards. And I guess when you understand that, yeah, it's a normal thing that your brain generates because you're doing something which is kind of unnatural in the sense that you're fighting against your body's natural instincts, then you can kind of view it in the right perspective, and it won't necessarily go away, the urge to do these behaviors, but you can kind of better keep it under control. So yeah, that's very well said. And so this is, I mean, how many contest preps have you done before this?
So I done 2 back in 2012, and then I backed it up the following year, which was probably the worst decision I ever made, and competed again in 2013. So it's been 5 years since I last stepped on stage.
Right. So I've heard you mention not long ago on Revive Stronger podcast, which was one of the things that sparked me to get you on again, or invite you back on again, that after one of your contest preps you powered through, and it was a very tough one, but you managed to get really shredded. But after that, you experienced some not very pleasant kind of blow up in weight. Can you share how that went exactly?
Yeah, for sure. I think sharing experiences like this is something that not a lot of bodybuilders talk openly about. There are obviously a few who do discuss it, but I think it's quite taboo in the fitness industry to talk about our not so pleasant past. And, I try to lead by example in demonstrating how unnecessary or dire the consequences of bodybuilding can be when it's not approached correctly. And yeah, for sure, I'll be glad to share that experience. So basically, I had been dieting from the minute I got into the whole fitness thing. From the age of 16 to 21, I would have been in a calorie deficit, and I got really good at the whole starvation thing. And I remember back from 17 to 19 years of age, I didn't cheat for nearly 2 years on my diet, and it was a low carb diet. Damn. Like I said, list of 5 to 10 foods. But then the binging started to become a regular occurrence. Instagram was gaining momentum, and I was following a lot of fitness professionals who only exacerbated my obsessive nature with this whole getting lean thing. And I started to get into the fitness industry as a coach when I was 18, and eventually opened my first facility. And I thought that one way I could fast track my name and career was to be a competitive bodybuilder and to take my conditioning to the next level, to show people that I knew what I was doing, even though I had absolutely zero clue as to the best approach to reducing body fat, competitive bodybuilding, and all the rest of it. So basically the first competitive season was, quite rigid, as you would expect. I did quite well, but then had quite a big blowout after the show, but it wasn't too bad the first time around. I had a 5-month break between starting my next prep, and this was when I learned about flexible dieting during this period, because I was so displeased with the restriction and just the suffering that came with eating 5 to 10 foods. And I was fortunate that I'm a pretty quick learner and was starting to stumble across some of the right people, such as Lyle McDonald, Alan Aragon. I learned about the concept of flexible dieting. So my second contest prep, I almost rebelled against the clean eating bro type mentality by including such a variety of foods that it really ended up biting me in the ass. I remember eating ice cream every day for the entire contest prep just because I wanted to, stick the middle finger to the chicken and broccoli diet. So that contest prep was tough because I didn't truly understand what a flexible diet was. I was eating a greater variety of foods, but I still had a very rigid mindset towards my nutrition in terms of I had to meet my calories to the T, my macros had to be on the gram, and if I went over, then my whole diet was a complete write-off for that day. And there was some binge episodes during that contest prep. I remember one night my brother was actually competing with me in this season, and he woke up to me in the pantry just devouring food, and he was like, "What are you doing? We're 3 weeks out." And I was like, "Samuel, I can't help it. Take it away from me." His name's Sam. And yeah, it was a pretty dark moment. We were both suffering, and here he was, my little brother, having to pull me away from, eating slices of bread with butter and all this kind of stuff. So it was quite bad, and I was only 21, so I was still very young. I, hadn't matured and experienced a lot in life, and to me bodybuilding was my life and it was my identity, and I felt like such a fraud and failure for being somebody who couldn't stick to the diet, but then having to wake up the next day, go to work and coach people and tell them to adhere to their diet. It was quite a mental struggle. It was very tormenting because I felt like such a fraud in that I was leading this completely opposing lifestyle to what people thought I was, and I felt very much torn by my actions and my intentions, and it was very tough. But nonetheless, that prep I did okay. Ended up getting pretty damn lean just as a function of hard work and being able to kill myself when I needed to make sure that I got the job done. But after that competition, things in my life really went sour. So my partner broke up with me during the prep just because, as you would expect, you become extremely selfish during a contest prep. I didn't know this. I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to communicate that to her. And she just got fed up, left me. And again, the perpetual frustration that came with the binge eating and the shame associated with that, and just comparing myself to other fitness professionals who always seem to have it together and never binge or cheat on their diet on social media. That comparison really caused my self-esteem to take a hit. And at the end of that contest prep, I ended up putting on 20 kilograms within a couple of months. And I had my facility was open at this stage, and yeah, I was a mess. Physically, mentally, I couldn't regain control of my eating no matter how hard I tried, because I was just trapped in this cycle of comparing myself to other people in the industry, feeling like a failure, being shameful of not being able to walk the walk and, lead by example. And I ended up taking myself off to Thailand. So I booked a trip, one-way ticket to Thailand. I had a return flight booked, but it was a open-ended return flight, and I ended up extending my trip 3 times. And the reason was I knew that I had to escape, and not to escape myself, but to escape the fitness lifestyle, because it was causing me more harm than good. I had to reconnect with myself. I had to learn how to regain control of my thoughts and emotions. Like I said, I needed to disconnect from the fitness industry and the pressure of looking a certain way, and just learn how to be normal, because from the age of 16 to 21, I had literally removed myself from all socializing because I didn't want to eat food. I didn't want other people to see what I was eating. It was quite serious. And at my 21st birthday, I didn't eat a single portion of food. I didn't drink one alcoholic beverage. I actually went into the kitchen after the cake and had a protein shake, only to have, my friends, family, and girlfriend at the time just come over and say, "What are you doing? That's ridiculous." I was pretty hardcore, man. And when I say hardcore, I mean that in the sense that I was very rigid. There was no balance, because it was all or nothing. I was either on the diet or completely off the diet. And I was so good at restricting myself and just suffering that I could handle any comments, criticisms, or external pressures, but it all boiled up and it got to a point where I just craved normalcy. And I took myself off to Thailand and I was there for 3 weeks on my own. And literally, man, I walked into a gym in the first week and I was like, okay, this is how it's going to be. I'm going to regain, my physique. I'm going to get myself down 10 kilos by the end of the trip. I'm going to start eating clean, tidy myself up and come back and everyone will be like, oh, Jacob's, looking good again. He's back to normal. But I walked into the gym on that first week when I was there. I was actually in Koh Samui and I just walked straight back out.
Damn.
And it was funny. I walked straight out, got on my motorbike because that's one of my little pleasures. And again, everybody was doing it over there. And I thought, well, that's what normal people are doing. So I'm going to do that. I'm not going to do cardio. I'm going to get a motorbike and I'm going to ride. I've never ridden a motorbike before, but I'm going to do it. So I rode to one of the bars, Arc Bar in Thailand. I'm sure many of the listeners who have been might be familiar with this. And it was in the afternoon and I just thought, you know what, screw it. And mind you, I hadn't drank alcohol for a very, very long time. So I walked up to the bar and I just got a drink, sat there on my own, and I'd never really smoked a cigarette or anything that resembled that. And I thought, you know what, stuff it. I'm going to try this thing. It was disgusting. And yeah, I was like, screw this. I'm just going to do what other people do because I'm so sick and freaking tired of being that fitness guy. And it was almost rebelling against, everything I thought I wanted. And the trip transpired, and I just started focusing on meeting people. I focused on, just eating whatever was put on the table. Like I'd go to dinner and I'd say to, whoever I was with, because I'd end up going, meeting other Australians and other, tourists from England, from the US, all over the world. And, I'd go for dinner or lunch or whatever. And, I'd say, I'll have whatever you're having. Yeah. And I just learned to eat just whatever was on offer, and I really focused on being grateful. And like I mentioned, one of the main reasons that I went there was because I was very self-aware of what was going on internally. I've always been quite an introspective individual and quite aware of my thoughts, which is why I guess I was so good at this whole bodybuilding thing, was because I learned to control my thoughts, just not in a very balanced or healthy manner. But I needed to regain control of that in a less restrictive and harmful way. So yeah, I found a lot of usefulness and, enjoyment from just being present and learning not to stress about what I was going to look like if I ate a certain food, or how much, water I would retain, or, how much cardio I would have to perform if I wanted to, get my conditioning back or anything like that. I would just be able. And I think this was probably one of the most pivotal moments in my life, and it changed the course and the direction that my life took, because I became human and I felt a sense of release and relief, day by day. It was quite overwhelming just how, this weight on my shoulders was slowly being lifted every single moment that I spent, just in Thailand on my own, playing pool, watching the sunrise. I remember going into the ocean. I actually caught up with a friend from Australia in Thailand. We went into the ocean one night, and they have these, I can't remember off the top of my head what they're called, because my knowledge outside of anything fitness related is dismal. But these fish in the water that, illuminate, when you splash the water, and I remember just watching them going, wow, this is what it's like to live. And it was liberating. Yeah. It was truly liberating, watching the sunrise, watching the sunset, dancing, with absolute randoms, things that I had never done before. And as a 21-year-old male, I was 22 at this stage, having never experienced at least some degree of normalcy, it was refreshing. And it was what I needed to evolve as a human. And it allowed me to reconnect with who I am, prioritize, what I want, because I think often at times when we experience something in complete contrast to what we think we desire or what we do truly desire, we start to appreciate that thing a lot more, and how much we do value wanting to have that thing, and what we're willing to do to pursue it, and what we have to give up on all the rest of it. So yeah, by the end of the trip, it was phenomenal. I to be honest, Abel, full transparency here on this one. I'd slept with 2 women up until I was 22. Both of my girlfriend, I had a girlfriend of 5 years and then a girlfriend of, 18 months until she left me at the end of that contest prep. And, by societal standards, that's not a lot of women these days. By the age of 22, most men are, out there on the weekend, getting jiggy with it, so to speak. Yeah. And in that Thailand trip, I let my creative juices and, my bodily fluids go. And, I just experienced life, man. And it was, I know your podcast is called the Self-Development Podcast. And this experience for me was game-changing. It was the most self-development that I could have ever asked for. And, there's a lot of things that I probably will look back on when I'm, in my 30s and 40s and go, oh, you idiot, why did you do that? But at the same time, I'm very grateful for, having number one, the opportunity, because I don't think that everyone is in a position to, afford such a luxury like that. But obviously a lot of my hard work paid off and I was able to take time away from, the grind, so to speak, and go do this for myself. But number two, being able to recognize that I needed help, and not help in the traditional sense where we rely on somebody else, but help in finding myself. And I think that sometimes, mental health issues aside, the best way to help, yourself is to do something for yourself, and to get to know yourself. And that experience was very, very beneficial in terms of my self-awareness, and just as a whole, my self-esteem, because I realized, how little value, comparison actually holds. And when we can constantly compare ourselves to this objective standard, the pressure that places on us and how that detriments our self-esteem, and then obviously our actions, behaviors, and everything snowballs from there. But this experience really highlighted to me that, the only standard you should be comparing yourself against is the one that, you hold yourself against, and that is your beliefs, your values, and, what it means to be you. So, yeah, man, that was the Thailand trip.
Damn. Damn, dude, you're amazing. I mean, seriously, someone should direct a movie from this. I didn't even know. Seriously, I didn't even know where to start. Because there are just so many aspects of this. I'm sure that as you were talking about your initial struggles, I predict that a lot of people listening to this will have the feeling, which I had while listening to this, that, yep, done that, but you just took everything to a whole different level than most of us have. But, a lot of the initial struggles, you mentioned how you just felt like an imposter or just a flawed fitness professional, like a flawed bodybuilder, that you can't practice what you preach, how hurtful or painful that was. I think that's so many of us have experienced that at certain points. I certainly have. I was talking about certain things and certain aspects of mindset. I was talking about, the sustainable self-development concepts while I was not practicing that. I knew objectively what to do or what the right thing would have been. And at the same time, I was falling off the wagon. And I just felt terrible during that. And I know a lot of people, even those who are not necessarily content producers, have the same feeling. They want to think about themselves as these rational, machines who can just tweak things and do cool stuff with their bodies and transform into something better. And at the same time, they fall off the wagon or they screw things up. And it's interesting how you mentioned in the beginning, I'm kind of just going through one by one about certain things you said. You mentioned how for 2 years or even more, you didn't cheat on your diet. One would think that 2 years clean pretty much means forever clean, because that's a really long ass stride. And there are some people for whom that's probably true. For example, Steve Hall, the way he speaks, I tend to think that, this guy is never going to have a binge in his life. Like that, this guy just seems so rational, like just so unshakable, but you never know. And I just interacted with a guy who just finished a very successful diet, done everything right, diet breaks frequently, practiced maintenance. In the meanwhile, he kind of embarked on personal development. And if you listen to him speaking and see some of his writing, you would think that this guy not only has dieting figured out, but he has the entire life figured out. Like this guy is rocking on. And then just, a week ago, he wrote to me that he had a binge and he's confused. Why did this happen? And, you know, I just imagine the sheer stress he must be under, that he screwed up after such a good stride. And here you are. I guess it's almost comforting for people to see that here you are, this guy who is a successful bodybuilder, has a great physique, a successful businessman, says all these cool things, and is an inspiration for a lot of people. And here you have this story which you've experienced deaths in this regard that a lot of us can only imagine how that must be like. And the final thing I want to reflect on, now I went on for way too long for a podcast host, but the you know, how you mentioned this, I mean, the way you described what happened to you in Thailand, that kind of reminded me how sometimes you do things. For example, Birger Fagerli, when he was on my podcast, and he talked about how doing a zero carb carnivorous diet and eliminating all plant foods, that was like a hard reset on his digestive tract because he suffered from digestive issues for a long time. And it's kind of a weird analogy, but in that case, you know, tweaking fiber and introducing these different prebiotic plant foods was not the solution to normalize his gut flora. It was actually to go without fiber altogether. And, you know, I'm sure that someone could have rationalized in your situation after blowing up after the bodybuilding show, being burnt out, that, yeah, maybe doing a very smart diet with very measured strategies of this diet break here and that refeed there, and tweaking your carb intake this way, and journaling everything, and whatever, seeking a nutritionist or a counselor or something, that could be a solution. But it was actually something entirely different, which was just taking a break from the entire process and just resetting your entire mindset. And that's ultimately what helped you. And the last thing I want to say is that, you know, a couple of months ago, I experienced something quite similar. I didn't go to Thailand, but I had a period which was not the healthiest physically. I mean, there were days when I probably ingested more grams of alcohol than protein. And, you know, I partied and whatever, was just YOLOing. I didn't put out a podcast episode for like 2 months. I'm not proud of that period per se, but that was exactly what was needed to reset my mind and make me more fired up than ever about, you know, fitness and just improving myself in that regard. So, do you want to reflect on what I just said, or can I throw my next question at you?
Yeah, I just want to add to that I think these kind of experiences are only valuable if you learn something from it, and more importantly, you take away strategies to make you know, your lifestyle better, and to allow you to develop your, you know, physique aspirations in the context of this discussion more sustainable. And one thing that I took away from this whole Thailand experience was, okay, well, I've gone 6 years without, you know, allowing myself any form of, you know, quote unquote relief, and I've blown up. Perhaps I should maybe incorporate, you know, more frequent, you know, periods of relief. So it was actually after this Thailand trip that I enjoyed myself so much that from that year onwards, I booked a trip to Bali every 6 months for 7 days. So bi-yearly, I go to Bali, and I've been now 11 times since back then. And that has, you know, changed, you know, how I approach my work, my, you know, fitness goals, because I know that, you know, I can work hard and there's going to be this relief. And I think the best way to look at this is to compare it and to use the analogy of, you know, what a deload is for hard overloading mesocycles. You know, we can only push the body and push the mind so much before, you know, the summation of fatigue accumulates beyond what we can recover from. And, you know, then we start to see all the adverse outcomes of, you know, non-functional overreaching. And if it continues, overtraining, even though that's very, very rare, all the rest of it. But, you know, I'm sure listeners will get the drift. But I think the key takeaway here is to, you know, implement strategies, you know, as you would in your training to your mindset. You know, and, you know, we can reverse engineer from, you know, say a, you know, bi-yearly break, whether it's going overseas, whether it's just, you know, taking time away from the fitness industry or anything that causes you stress and pressure. And, you know, I have 1 day a week where I just don't, you know, touch anything fitness related. You know, unfortunately there are circumstances where, you know, I go some weeks where by circumstance, I have to, you know, work around the clock as a function of running my own business. But I think if you're in a position where you don't have to do that, I think, you know, we should manage anything that is a perceived stress or pressure, on an acute time scale and on a chronic time scale. And I think that can definitely help mitigate these, blow ups, so to speak, that I experienced. But yeah, just to speak on your last point, Abel, strategies and thinking prospectively about how you can manage yourself is extremely important. And yeah, I've been 5 years and I haven't had a blow up like that. So good sign that, I guess this is working for me, and N equals 1, right? But I think the concept is important for a lot of people.
Yeah. And I'm sure that a lot of people who might be listening to this and maybe are thinking, probably not a lot of people knowing my audience, but maybe there are always some people who have not experienced any of this, and they are just living their life like a machine, and they are doing the stuff like you did on your birthday of, drinking protein shake instead of trying the chocolate cake that, and I know that I've had periods in my life when that kind of behavior actually it actually made me fulfilled. It was exciting to me. I was doing these neurotic things, but I was enjoying it. I didn't perceive it as a sacrifice that is making my life harder. It was, I felt proud. It was meaningful to me to do these things. And it was a slow, it just slowly snuck up on me. And I think this happens to a lot of people, where you do these kinds of behaviors and you don't notice that transition point where this thing that excited you for a while is no longer exciting to you. Now you're just doing it compulsively, and it is in control of your life, as opposed to, vice versa. And I guess that's, a lot of people don't notice this point because it's hard, because, like you said in the beginning, you gravitate towards behaviors that you're used to or what have served you in the past. And when you're in that situation, maybe if you would have approached your training and nutrition with a more balanced kind of mindset from an earlier point onwards, you wouldn't have needed this whole break in Thailand. But it's gotten to the point where, you had to walk out of a gym in disgust as you walked in there, which, hopefully not everybody has to get to this point. But when you're there, then maybe it is actually necessary to just push a hard reset. What you mentioned about the trips to Bali is also very interesting. And I guess the main lesson from that is there is a time and there is a time for everything. Even Mike Israetel, who is, if people are following his work, there is not a question that guy is a machine from a training and nutrition perspective. But even he says that, every once in a while he has, just a week where he is just going on a round trip. He's not training. He's just eating whatever, waking up whenever, going to bed whenever. And that helps him to get going. So another thing I wanted to ask you about this trip is, like, after how long was it that you felt like, okay, I am ready to return? I'm ready to return to my machine-like lifestyle and to reignite my fitness pursuits once again.
Whew, yeah, now you've taken a trip down memory lane. I've got to think hard and long about this one, but it definitely wasn't within 14 days, because I had a flight booked, or I had my ticket at least booked for, I think it was the 15th or 16th day, but it was I could change the flight to whatever date that I wanted to, but I did change it, so I obviously wasn't ready after 2 weeks. And I lasted, I think off the top of my head, it was around like 23 or 24 days or something along those lines. So it probably was just after the 2 week mark when I started to, miss, all of the routine and structure, that I had going back in Melbourne. And I realized that this, lifestyle of, doing whatever wasn't very fulfilling or meaningful to me. And again, I think this was an important turning point, because it taught me what my true values and beliefs are. And, that is to be someone who is committed and passionate towards something. And I felt very lost, after that 14-day mark. I do remember distinctly, just sitting in the hotel room on my own, watching movie after movie, ordering room service, thinking, this isn't really giving me, the same level of satisfaction that, waking up and, going to the gym or writing a blog or, coaching somebody does. And I missed a lot of the things that I was previously doing. I think that's equally as important as the recalibration of the system, and getting away from all of the hardcore neurotic behaviors that some of us fitness enthusiasts do adopt. But I think that's a lot of the time what makes us who we are, and you will quickly realize that, like I did, that being somebody you're not is nowhere near as enjoyable as living and being true to who it is you really are. But at times, like you mentioned, Abel, there's a fine line between doing what you like, what you enjoy, what you're passionate about, and what gives you satisfaction, and then overdoing it. And I think that these kind of blow ups or pushbacks from the mind and the body can often help us see where that boundary lies.
Right. Now, what I would be curious about is, do you, when you're working with someone, do you have these kinds of red flags that you're looking for when you see some sorts of really neurotic, or when you see that things are getting out of control, things are getting out of hand, that you recommend something similar for people to do? Not necessarily to the same degree that you're sending them to Thailand, but just telling someone at some point that, look, dude, the solution for you right now isn't to tweak your macros even better or to take this diet break or eat at maintenance. You actually need a break from the process. Does that ever happen, or it never has to go to that length?
Yeah, it definitely does happen, man. Like, I've had a client who was a hardcore bodybuilder, and he was so engrossed in the process, and I know very well that he lived and breathed everything bodybuilding. And the advice I gave him was just to step away from things for a while. Just take a week off the gym, take a week off dieting, and just see how he felt. And this was not too long ago, actually. And the reason I advise that was because, like I said, sometimes, you need to have what you love taken away from you to truly appreciate it, to recalibrate the system and come back with that vigor and that spark that we often lose when we become obsessed or so entrenched in a certain thing. And yeah, I advise him to take a week off the gym. Obviously, no Thailand trips were planned into things, but I did recommend, not tracking his calories, not following a meal plan. I said, don't cook oats for breakfast. Don't, just have a bowl of cereal. Like, just eat whatever the hell you want. Eat when you want. I said 1 week isn't going to cause you to lose all your gains. And, obviously, reminded him that, muscle memory hangs around quite a while, and he's not going to lose all his hard-earned gains in just 7 days of, no training. And I said, and when you're ready, go back to the gym and do what you feel like. Screw following well-structured, program that, implements progression schemes, has the right amount of volume, frequency, intensity, and all of that. And I said, why did you start lifting? I said, go into the gym and just do what feels right. And yeah, after I think it was 8 or 9 days, he called me up and he said, dude, I went to the gym tonight. He's like, I put, some trance on, I did supersets, I did drop sets, and it was freaking awesome. He goes, I had so much fun. He said, and I remember why I love this. And I'm like, man, that is awesome. Like, we always talk about, doing what is optimal. And I think sometimes in cases like this, especially when you're dealing with somebody who is a little bit burnt out and just taking things a little bit too far, that steering away from optimal and allowing them to do what feels right. And sometimes that takes a while for people to figure out. Not everyone gets it in 8 or 9 days or even, 3 to 4 weeks. Sometimes it can be longer, and I've definitely seen that with powerlifters, especially because they become so obsessed with the numbers. They're doing 3 lifts and they just wear themselves into the ground that, often powerlifters, when they take a break, it's for quite a while, and they often, turn to completely different sports. But that's a little bit out of context, but yeah, I think sometimes taking a break is what is needed, and I think many people fear taking a break, but in reality should be planning in some time away from what they love, so they do get back that passion, that vigor, and just that lust for what it is they want.
Yeah. Now, kind of just to wrap this up slowly, and your story and the things that you've said. I mean, this I will probably find a lot of occasions and kind of excuses to play in clips from your story whenever I can, because I think it will just be so enlightening for so many people. I'm really grateful that you shared what you shared here. And, one thing that I often think about, kind of when I think of myself as this fitness enthusiast, I know that I will never be a bodybuilder. I don't have the genetics. I don't even necessarily have the desire to become a bodybuilder. Maybe as one day as kind of a personal challenge, I will do it. But I often think about how I imagine myself in the long term, kind of what sort of a fitness identity I want for myself. Like, how do I imagine my long-term life? How do I imagine fitness fitting into that? And I heard you mention before that kind of you're deliberately doing this bodybuilding show now because it's sort of at the right time in the context of your entire life and the life of your kids, how they will see you as a dad. And that you don't plan competing after this for a while. So once this competition will be over with, how do you see your long-term fitness ambitions? Like, what will be your goals, and how do you plan to reframe some of the things that you have been doing up until now in that front?
Yeah, so I am a planner. And probably my biggest downfall, Abel, is that I am very strategic with the way I operate. I do think quite long term, and I think it's probably these experiences when I was younger that have forced me to be, so futuristic in the way that I go about things. So next year for me is going to be very much focused on the business. Which is JPS, so my 2 facilities that I have in Melbourne and the coaching company that I run, as well as family, more importantly. There's no holidays planned this year, no Bali trips. So despite what I said, unfortunately, when the time calls for it, you can't always, do what is right. Sometimes you do have to suck it up a little bit and get on with things. And this year is one of those years for me. So next year, I'll be taking my family to Bali. I will be prioritizing wearing the dad hat, the coach hat, and the business hat, and not necessarily, being the bodybuilder and attaching my identity solely to the sport. I will obviously continue to lift and eat. Obviously I'm going to eat because otherwise I would die. But I'm going to eat like I would normally eat, which is, a high protein diet. My calories are going to obviously change depending on what the occasion calls for. And yeah, I think just shifting the primary identity that I want to assume, not to say that this year I'm disregarding, the responsibilities I have to my family and my business, but obviously bodybuilding will take, a bit of a foreground in terms of where I focus my time and energy simply due to the demands of the sport. But once that's all said and done, it'll be slowly transitioning back into normalcy, getting myself to a healthy body fat percentage, a healthy mindset and, mental state, and then just doing life, man. Bodybuilding is very much a part of my life now. It isn't my entire life. And I aim to keep it that way throughout this prep. And obviously keep the duration at which it does become that all-encompassing and, I guess suffocating experience to a minimum. So,
right. Yeah,
the goals next year are to just keep lifting, keep being or trying to be an amazing dad, an amazing partner, do the best I can with my, my business. And who knows, I might get back into some powerlifting because I just love lifting weights. I am competitive by nature. So, not getting up there and challenging myself in one way, shape, or another always seems to eat at me. So I think there may be some powerlifting on the cards, but it's too early to tell.
Right. No, that's great. And last 2 questions for you, man. I know that you mentioned earlier that you find it important to be grateful for the things that you can be grateful for. Do you have some sort of what do you do? Or do you do anything personal development-wise these days? Do you have a gratitude journal or something of that nature?
Yeah, so just in my phone, I have a notes and I have a list of things that I'm grateful for, and I just add to that every day. And yeah, when I find myself down and out or struggling, and to, again, keep up with the theme of transparency in this episode, the last month has been quite difficult for me on a personal level, just with the number of challenges at work, change, within my life has proven to be more difficult than I initially expected. So I've been pulling out the gratitude journal on the daily, or whenever I feel those negative thoughts just start creeping in a little bit too much or becoming too overbearing. And I read it out 3 to 5 times. One of the other self-development strategies that I employ, which I learned from my tennis coach back when I was 15 to 16. Funny story about that. I actually got banned from playing tennis in Australia because I was a little brat and used to smash rackets, and I actually screamed out in a qualifying final, because I used to play at quite a high level, but I screamed out, I have the touch of a rapist. And that didn't go down too well with the referees, and I ended up getting disqualified. My parents banned me from competing for 6 months, and I wasn't allowed to touch a racket for 6 months because I'd broken them all, and my sponsorship with Yonex ended quite abruptly after that. But I digress. My tennis coach taught me how to meditate, because that was all I could do during our training sessions, was meditate and visualize. So something I do every night before I go to bed after I've listened to a podcast, either yours or Steve Hall's, or 3DMJ. There's actually quite a few podcasts that I listen to. Sigma Nutrition, the list goes on. But I visualize. I visualize my success. I visualize what I want my subsequent days, months, and years to look like, and how I want things to unfold, whether it's me standing on the bodybuilding stage in September. That's been a frequent visualization for me. So just ingraining that visual of me being in the trunks, having the tan on under the hot lights, feeling not depleted on stage, but just that empty feeling of being sub 6-7% body fat. So that's been a really vivid image I've been replaying in my mind of late, as is smiling with my kids more frequently. So that's a little bit of an unusual one, I guess, for most people, but something when I find the pressure of life getting to me, as I visualize just smiling with my kids and the sense of warmth that comes with that. And I think the more real we can make these images in our mind, often it becomes a lot easier to perform and seek out the actions and behaviors necessary in the real world and in real time to make it a reality. So that's a little one I do as well.
Awesome. Perfect. And my last question to you, which is something that I just find interesting, is that you have several very well running businesses, and you're working with a lot of people, and JPS, I imagine, I don't know exactly your numbers or whatever, but I imagine you're doing well. And it's just incredible to me that you're still, doing these podcasts, interviewing people, organizing these conferences and whatever. I would imagine that this is not necessarily something that you have to do, putting out these infographics on Instagram. And, it's like your podcasts, which you're interviewing amazing people, you're doing your vlogs, you're providing a lot of value, which are, I guess, they're not necessarily vital to your business. What drives you to do these things?
Oh, what drives me to do it? That is a very deep question, Abel. I would say there is some innate desire to help people, because, to be honest, I've never been helped, and I've never been good at receiving help. I'm very stubborn, as I'm sure a lot of people are starting to realize now. I run to the beat of my own drum. But I've recognized that, help can be extremely beneficial. So I know through my own experiences how beneficial and useful having somebody to help can be. So I guess at the end of the day, everything I do is about trying to be there to help somebody in some way, shape, or form better themselves, their understanding of fitness, and just to inspire some positive change. So I don't know, man. It's not money, it's not accolades, it's not Instagram followers. Those things are very superficial, and to be honest, I couldn't care less about those kind of things. But I think hearing back from a lot of the people who do watch my content, or who have worked with our coaches or myself, and have them tell us, just how much we improved their well-being, that makes my heart very warm, and that brings a big smile to my face. So I guess the desire to help people. As corny and cheesy as it sounds, man, yeah, that would be it.
Perfect. No, awesome response. And cool, man. This was really, really incredible, and thank you so much for sharing everything that you've shared. We are just finishing at the hour mark, which is quite a feat. So yeah, very last question. What kind of resources would you like people to check out, or what are you working on that you would like people to see?
Yeah, so I guess just check out the JPS YouTube channel, Instagram, Facebook. I put out a fair bit of content across those mediums. Working on a contest prep ebook with Steve Hall, Pascal, and one of my colleagues from JPS, Lyndon Purcell, basically teaching people how to approach a contest prep and not screw themselves up like I did, like I know that Steve has in the past. So yeah, it's not a contest prep book that's a do-it-yourself kind of guide. It's more so a here's what to look out for and here's how to handle this process that you're going to go through. So that's going to be hopefully coming out very shortly. I'm just finishing up a few chapters on that, but yeah, keep an eye out for that, and I hope that it's beneficial for some of you.
Perfect. All right, Jacob, thank you so much. This was an absolute pleasure.
Not a problem, Abel. Thanks for having me, man.
Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave a comment and subscribe if you watch this on YouTube. If you listen to this on iTunes, please leave a rating to help this stuff grow. SoundCloud and Podbeam, you can just follow me to be notified on future episodes. And to be a contributing member of this podcast, join the Sustainable Self-Development Facebook group where you can drop ideas about future podcasts. I very often ask my listeners for tips and advice on who to get on next. So if you're interested in getting into discussions like that, be sure to join the Facebook group. And if you don't want to go through the searching process, just click one of those links in the show notes/video description. It is all there. All right, thanks for hanging around up until now, and see you next time.